Okay, here we go. Gilly, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, good to see you again.
Yeah, it's nice to see you. Gilly, I've been watching some of your videos recently. I know, obviously, I've known you for a number of years now in terms of what you do, the nutrition background, but I've been watching your videos diving heavily into stress, sleep, menopause, which is what I've titled the podcast today. And I wanted you to come and educate me, I guess, but also I know that the listeners, I know a lot of the people that listen to this podcast, and I guess a lot of the people that I train are actually female, who would be super interested in this topic. So I thought you would be the best person to get on.
Great. Well, I'll do my best. It's all of the research and kind of a new way of thinking about training and menopause is all pretty new as well. And there's a lot of focus. So it is good. I think over the next few years, there'll be a lot more consideration for women and women over 40 with training. So it's good.
Yeah, perfect. Gilly, before we kind of dive into that, do you want to just give yourself a little bit of an introduction in terms of who you are, what you do?
Yeah, so I'm a registered nutritionist now, but previous to that, I was a physical education teacher out in Dubai, moved out there in 2000, then went to work for myself, did some consulting, worked for the UAE government in terms of getting populations active and thinking of upskilling current staff working in and around the schools or in and around the UAE government departments. Did some private work for the ICC, for Mars, for Nike, for Princess Hire. So yeah, it was a crazy time. Lots of focus on health of the UAE and in particular nationals. So yeah, moved back to Valencia, lived in Valencia for a while, set up a company called Vida 6, looking at nutrition. Went back to England, did my master's because I felt I needed some credibility. Completed my master's and I'm back in the Midlands, so very different from Dubai. And now I've got a little practice in a place called Market Bosworth, which is lovely, and working with private clients, but predominantly women over 40, very stressed, very busy, and perimenopausal or menopausal. So that's me.
Perfect. So to be honest, as I mentioned before, I watched a few of your videos, and if anything, I want this to be a platform for you to just kind of tell us and talk to us about maybe some of the things that you go through on a day-to-day basis with your clients. So I've got a few questions for you, but I want to see if you cover them first, because I'm sure you will, and then I can kind of fire them at you after. But what types of things are you seeing on a day-to-day basis with your clients in terms of stress, sleep, menopause?
So I would say 99% of my clients come in, and the number one thing that they report when I do some kind of like motivational interviewing with them, so everyone will come in and say, I want to lose weight, unless they've been referred, and maybe I told you the dogs would go mad.
It's a pet-friendly show, don't worry.
Maybe it's we'll just give them a second because I think someone might be at the door. So most of my clients that come in to see me will say that the number one goal is weight loss. But when you actually delve into why that's important, it's quite a difficult question to ask. So then you start saying, well, how are you feeling every day? Signs and symptoms. And the number one reported symptom is fatigue. And I recently did like a menopause week and just said to people, jump on board, come and listen and have some modules to read and stuff like this. And I did a questionnaire with all of the participants, and something ridiculous like the number one factor was fatigue. 89% of women said the number one thing that they suffer with is fatigue. Okay, right. So that's something to consider. Do we need some blood measures? Do we need to figure out if there's an underlying condition there? Or is it just that you're super busy, you're working, you're trying to fit everyone in, trying to please everybody, you're overcommitted, you're trying to train because you feel like you should train either as you used to, or because there is some kind of media message out there saying if you're not training in this way and you're not doing all of this, then you're failing. And so really it's about stripping everything back. The number one consideration for me is what can clients actually manage. So that would be for everybody. Don't be unrealistic. There is no should. There's no government kind of protocol in any country that you're going to get your hands chopped off if you're not training or eating in a certain way. So why is it important to you? So what I find is with women over 40, there's sometimes maybe choosing a training method which is counterproductive to health. If you're already fatigued and you're trying to train because you feel like you should, or maybe you're trying to keep your weight at a manageable level, or you're trying to lose weight, whatever it might be, choosing the wrong type of training and doing the wrong type of intensity is going to be counterproductive. So yeah, I would say your answer to your question, the number one thing that I see is fatigue, whether that's people are not eating in the right way, so we can cover like tannins and absorbers for iron, which is a huge consideration for women, or they're training incorrectly, or they're not listening to their body. There's no rest and recovery protocol within their week. They're not sleeping. And to be honest, if you're not sleeping either the right number of hours or having the right quality, then all the training in the world and all the right kind of dietary protocols in the world are not going to help you. And then people's stress levels are completely different now. So we live in a world where stress is super high most of the time. And this year...
That's really interesting that you, obviously with the questionnaire and people coming in on a day-to-day basis with you, and the number one thing is weight loss. And it sounds like all of the things that you mentioned there outside of it are all things that can contribute to putting on weight, not losing weight, like quite significant factors as well that don't necessarily get taken into consideration versus what style of training am I doing?
Yeah, so like if you're even at athlete level, or if you're doing CrossFit and previously you were at the regional level, or you're involved in the sanctionals, or you're, you know, competing at top level, and you've got people looking after your body work, you've got great coaches, you've got a great program, you've got people supplying your food, you know, your food is calculated to the letter for you specifically. None of that is going to matter if you're sleeping poorly. Like, sleep probably is as or more important than nutrition. And I'm a nutritionist, so I'm talking myself out of a job. But yeah, it's applying a few basic considerations to how, first of all, you've got to analyze, how am I sleeping? What do I do before, you know, what's the lead up to bed? And then you can start putting some new protocols in place to try and improve. And basically, if you improved your sleep by 5 minutes a night, it's an improvement.
And listen, it's nothing new to anybody listening to this podcast, and people know the importance of sleep, and people probably don't put enough effort into trying to get better quality sleep. One of the things that I thought was really interesting, and I think people will get a lot from it, is obviously this comes from like your nutrition background as well. Lack of sleep in terms of hormone suppressant, in terms of like hunger, and what was that you were talking about?
Well, there's two things for women here. So when we start reducing estrogen, our sleep is usually compromised, but also our ghrelin, which is hunger hormone, and our leptin, fullness hormone, they're also compromised. The way I try and envisage it is that all of our hormones are linked somehow. In fact, if I had my time again, I think I would just go in to try and understand and study hormones completely. But they're like a domino effect. So they're all standing up nicely, but then when one falls over, it impacts another, and they all start impacting one another. So estrogen is a massive consideration, and we know that estrogen also encourages weight gain. But estrogen is also linked to cortisol, which is also linked to sleep and stress. So if our cortisol levels are simmering up at a very high level for most of the day, because we have work, we have training, we have family, we have money considerations or lockdown or whatever it might be, we have loads of kind of negative stimulus from screens, from phones, and everything is just happening all of the time, then cortisol levels are going to be high and they're not going to be dropping down. And we know that cortisol is a fat storer and it encourages fat to be stored around the abdomen. So women over 40, when you're considering your whole lifestyle and looking at things really holistically, you've got to think, well, already my hormones are like at a strange level and they're doing different things. So it's like chicken and egg. If my hormones are off, I'm going to probably be making poor food choices the next day, because now my ghrelin and leptin are like all over the place. And then if I make poor food choices, that's going to have an impact on my sleep and probably my stress, because one of the other things, so you've got weight to consider, you've got inflammation in the body to consider, and I was going to say something else there. All right. And then you've got unhealthy gut bacteria. So your gut microbiome, if you're feeding it processed foods and really sugar-based foods, and it's producing more unhealthy gut bacteria, then you're not giving your healthy gut bacteria a chance. And we know already that the link between brain and gut is a two-way process. They're communicating with each other all the time. And we know that stress and anxiety and some mental health disorders come from some of the species of gut microbiome we have. So it's like, it's a never ending cycle of, I'm tired, I'm not sleeping properly, I'm making bad food choices, I'm not sleeping properly. And stress is all mixed up in there as well.
I think it's a great point that you brought up there. And I think it's really important to note that when people are exercising, when you're going to the gym and lifting weights, or you're going and doing a HIIT class, or you're going and doing a CrossFit class, that is stress on the body. So if you're already feeling stressed through day-to-day life, all of the things that you mentioned, and then you're going and adding more stress on top of that, then obviously there's like you said, the chicken and the egg. It's almost like a recipe for disaster there. But is there something that you recommend? Is there kind of like a range of exercise? Is, a little bit of movement or a little bit of exercise better than doing nothing at all? Or is that a period of time where it's like, hey, no, you need to take a week off now? What's the differences there?
Well, let's differentiate between like NEAT and your daily activity and exercise, which is like, for me, it's scheduled, it's training. I would say for women, I always say for women, because most of the research on exercise is done on men, and usually healthier, younger men. So when you're looking at like data, more recent data is obviously always going to be more valid. But if it's specifically women that we're looking at, we work without menopause, we work on a 28-day cycle. So in fact, there's going to be different phases within that month where we should be training differently anyway. And that's down to you, or if you're at a high level, down to your coach as well, to determine where you are over those 28 days. Sometimes you're going to be so strong and like at PB mode, and you're always going to be hitting numbers. And other days you're going to be like frazzled, and you should just be doing like more restorative work on the body, and walking and yoga and Pilates and accessory work, and just reading your body, listening to your body, and chilling out a bit. So with menopause and over 40, it's the same thing. When your estrogen is lower, okay, we're not talking about women that have decided to go down the route of HRT, because that can really change things. In fact, that can be very beneficial for training. But we're talking about just naturally, or perimenopause leading up, which can be 10 years before you hit menopause. So it's really looking at, how do I feel today? Or you can track. So there's like, there's a tracking system to mind. I think there's 34 different points that you can track for menopause. And you just look at all of those and you think, right, how do I feel today? Now, that's not that then you can't go training, because exercise will improve the symptoms of menopause, but it's just the type and the intensity that you choose. So for me personally, I have the confidence and I have the understanding of my own body, and I understand training. So I can say on a particular day, I'm really not feeling it today. But also I have to know that when I go in, I have to be strong enough to put ego to one side and not try to compete against everybody else, because I'm going to make myself feel worse. So change the stimulus, change the weight if it's RX, change one of the activities within a WOD, for example. Or if you're on a strength element or a gymnastics practice, just understand you're not feeling it. So scale things right back. And it will be more beneficial to move and go through that type of workout rather than completely beasting it. So I don't know if you know Luke Lehman, who used to work for Charles Poliquin in America, and they did a lot of the early kind of newer training information, but he now works out in Australia, and he calls it least mode, not beast mode. You've just got to, like, if you scale it back and do less, you're going to get way more gains at that time, depending on where you are in the month or just in general how you're feeling.
I think, like I've mentioned before, a lot of the clientele that I train are females, and I don't know whether it's just down from because I've been coaching for such a long time that it just happens kind of naturally. I never go, and obviously I'm training people for health over performance. Like I've been there and done that with, CrossFit athletes and sports people, that type of stuff, but for health. And my whole attitude has changed in a training session. And it's not because I perhaps think, someone might be going through this time of the month or going through this stage of, menopause. It's literally a case of if someone comes in and I've noticed some things, maybe they've lacked a little bit of energy recently, or maybe they've even brought it up and said, hey, I'm a little bit tired today. It's easy for me to say, hey, here's where we're going to scale back. Here's what we're going to change. And it makes no difference to me. And I can see the fact that they're coming to this session might just be that one positive that they've got, that they've come, they've joined the community, they're with their friends. Yes, they haven't done beast mode in the training session, but you know what? They have got a hell out of a lot of doing it on its own.
I think there's 101 other benefits to turning up and doing CrossFit or classes or exercise, whatever people choose. Just scale back something and leave feeling like you shouldn't be absolutely knackered and need to go to bed. You should be like, I feel good and I'm glad I did that. And it could be that I don't know, I don't know how CrossFit facilities feel about it, but you go in and you do the strength element, and then whilst people are doing the WOD, if you're not feeling great, jump on the bike and do something different, but still be there. But again, you're probably going to have to work with somebody a bit more understanding and experienced, because otherwise you don't want to be in a situation where you feel under pressure or you're forced to do heavier training, let's say.
Yeah. And I guess that comes into another conversation. Sometimes the training environment that you're in, and obviously just having that conversation with a coach to begin with and be like, hey, I'm not training to try and be the best, the fittest that I've ever been. I'm training for, for health, for life, that type of stuff as well.
Mm-hmm. And also have your own strategies. You could, if you went in and said you were injured, no one in the world is going to make you do something. Oh, we've got squats today. I've got really bad knees. They're so painful. They're keeping me awake at night. Oh, well, just continue to squat. I want you to work at 90% or whatever. Like, what? No one would ever say that. So if you go in and you feel fatigued, like, that's really important as well. Or you're just feeling off, you're not feeling yourself, you say that. It should be the two should be exactly the same.
Yeah, really great points. Gilly, why is taking a nap a good idea?
Oh, it's the best ever. So you can't, like millions and millions of Mediterraneans can't be wrong that the siesta is necessary. So even in the village that I went to live in Valencia, they almost have like an alarm. So they have like the mayor comes on a tannoy over the village every day, gives his little announcement, and that's like siesta time. So all the schools, all the businesses are out, you've had lunch, and then it's like, now it's siesta time. Because we're not, as a species, we're not designed to sleep like for 8 hours during the night. We were never like that. So we're based on rhythms, and we dip in the afternoon. So having a siesta in preparation for that dip and trying to feel more revitalized and having more repair in the body happen, and then maybe having another nap around 5-6 o'clock again when we dip again. That's how we would have existed. But now it's like, oh no, we all work 9 to 5 now, so you've got to fit your sleep in around that and make sure that you get these hours during the night. But not everybody's made that way. Some people are super up, naturally they wake early and they're up and about, but they go to bed early. And other people are like night owls. They like to stay up late and then they wake up later. And in an ideal world, you wouldn't fight, that the type of bird that you are, whether it's like an early bird or a night owl, because you would work your day around your sleep. But that would be like shocking. And if you ever said to somebody at work, well, unless you work for Google or somebody like that, oh, I'm going to just go off for a nap now to revitalize, they would just think you're skiving off or something. But you'd be way more productive because you'd wake up.
Yeah, it's amazing that time as well, like the siesta time and that dip in the afternoon. I had this conversation with so many people and they're like, oh, that's the hardest time. That's when I've just got to have a pick me up, eat some sugary snacks to kind of get myself going. Like it's around about that time now and I'm actually feeling okay, but I've just had a cup of tea. I could have easily have just tucked a pack of biscuits away as well, but I knew that wouldn't benefit me.
Well, hey, having the sugar anyway is counterproductive because you spike. So I worked on a diabetes program for 12 months before I started working for myself with the NHS. I learned so much about glucose and insulin, and like not just for diabetics, but just for everyone. So we always think, oh, we must reach for this because it's sugary and I'm going to have energy. It's just nonsense because you spike up very quickly, you dip down, and then your body's like, I need more of that, I need more of that. And so it's not the best thing. So the better snacks to try and keep everything really level would be proteins and healthy fats, and try and avoid the sugary stuff. Again, it's also helping with inflammation. It's also helping with healthy gut microbiome. So it's knowing that fatigue will not be solved by sugar. Absolutely. So the Mediterraneans, I was just going to go back to the sleep thing. I didn't know this till recently, but apparently what they do, as a nutritionist, I'm not recommending this, but this is what they do. They have an espresso and go to sleep, so that the espresso starts kicking in and they wake up naturally. So it's like a 20-minute window, if you like. Have the coffee, sleep, but then it will start kicking into your system. So when you wake up, you're like ready to go. Now, there's no research behind this. I don't know, how unhealthy it might be. I suppose it depends because it's a stimulant, but it's kind of makes.
Yeah, I might give that a try. If I ever have a nap, I always fear waking up after the nap, even if it's 30 minutes. I feel horrendous. I don't know if anybody else has a nap. I always feel horrible as soon as I wake up. And then like a minute later when I've got up, because obviously I've got to go and do something, yeah, I feel great. But that instant from waking up from a nap is like, and you've been asleep for like 25 minutes, 30 minutes, just feel like, oh.
Maybe you were going too deep. So like, maybe for you it's 12 minutes because you don't want to get into that zone where you're too deep and then it's difficult to come out of that. So I think there's something to be said for I've never tried it actually, but for the coffee thing. But I will say I had a couple of years of Valencia and sleeping and having great siestas. I think it makes a difference that the quality of the food is so much better, but I've never felt healthier.
Yeah.
that's got to be in there and one of the main things. I do sometimes have a nap here in England, but inevitably I don't know what it is. It seems that you're always busy here, whereas you get into the mindset in Spain of just being a bit more chilled, and almost like work isn't as important.
So we all need to move to Spain. That's what we need to do.
Yeah, immediately. Yeah.
What I thought was really interesting, you kind of touched a little bit on nutrition then, in terms of, I like the peaks and troughs with, you know, carbohydrate and sugar intake. And I always think of it as, if you know that you're going to have that spike, that might be the thing that puts you off. If you know that you're going to be actually in a worse position, it's almost like, for anybody that goes out and drinks alcohol, you're stealing happiness from the next day. It's that same kind of premise, isn't it? But
Yeah.
one of the things that you spoke about, and I want to get your opinion on this because of your nutrition background, diets in terms of, you know, because in the media, calorie deficit, all of that type of stuff, and measuring macros, there's some importance to it. How do you find that in terms of, you know, managing stress, sleep, and menopause as well? Do you prefer to kind of guide people through lower carb diets, or, you know, what's your thought process behind that?
Given that 2/3 of the UK population are probably pre-diabetic, I think understanding carbs is really important. I never cut out food groups because I'm working predominantly with populations, like you were saying, for health. I'm not working with athletes, and health is the number one consideration, and reducing risk of diseases that kill people in the UK, basically. So I prefer portion control. I think that calories and macros, first of all, can be massively inaccurate. So when people are giving dietary advice, what I say is the number one thing for people to consider is, if you had an issue with your car, you wouldn't go to the dentist. You know, like, the dentist might have an interest in cars and might own some classic cars and have tinkered in the garage, but they're a dentist essentially. So ask the question, like, how qualified and knowledgeable is the person that's giving dietary advice? And then I think cutting out food groups, counting things, obsessing over numbers is, again, counterproductive. So my job is to remove as much stress from that person as possible. I can do a meal plan. I can manage what they potentially should be having. But again, even with the meal plan, I'm like, you can deviate. If you're working to the portions I'm advising, you can switch this for that. You can have this instead. You can have a day where you don't even look at the meal plan, as long as you're considering portions. Because if we know that calories and the reporting of calories and the reporting of macros is 15 to 40% inaccurate, why do it anyway? So just like, it's all about the choice of food and the portion for me. And once people move away from diet culture, must diet, must follow this, and it's just more, it sounds really cheesy, but it's more of a way of life. It's about getting the basics right. 99% of general population don't even get the basics right, and they're not consistent with the basics. If you're 3 months down the line and you've been following something to the letter and getting some great results, and you want to move to the next level, then consider tracking in terms of numbers. But I guarantee that most people won't even get there. They'll have the intention in the beginning, right, yeah, I'm going to do these foundations and then I want to move on. It's not necessary, because people start noticing better sleep, stress is more in control, better weight management, better mood, whatever it might be. All of these things are reported back as improvements. So why do we need to start looking at numbers again? However, if you're an athlete and you're making your money from your physical, let's say, and your ability, then of course you might need to move to that next level. But then I would say it's more likely that somebody's going to work something out for you, and then your meals are maybe going to be delivered or prepared for you. Because if you leave it to an individual who doesn't have experience of nutrition, they deviate off anyway. They get things wrong. I went on a course in London about 2 months ago now, and it was about meal analysis and the accuracy of meal analysis using like the various tools that there are. And there were 8 nutritionists there, or 7 nutritionists and 1 dietitian. And when we were going through the calculations individually, not one person came out with the same thing. And that's like people with years of experience. So how can you expect general population to go away? And I'm not being funny, but some of these tools that you can get like on apps and stuff, like what's that really popular one that people always tell me about? I can't think of the name of it. There's something
the V Shred guy, is it?
No, not that. There's like an app that tracks your calories and works out all the macronutrients and stuff.
There's a few around these days.
Yeah, it's like
Noom
is like a dietary approach. It's more Noom. You'd put more in the category of Weight Watchers and Slimming World, except Noom probably work with the same philosophy that I do in terms of don't cut food groups, eat real food, and measure out portions. But it's like a club, and people can join up, and you might have a nutritionist in the background, but that nutritionist might be looking after like 250 clients. They're just doing IT basically and looking at what questions the group are coming up with. So it's not individual. My Fitness Pal, is it Fitness Pal? Yeah, that.
Fitness Pal, yeah.
People always go, oh yeah, but I track my food, and I mean, yeah, that's not accurate. If you look at 2 foods on my Fitness Pal, which would probably be really similar in terms of like macros and stuff, my Fitness Pal could come out with completely like different values. It's not accurate.
So I think the point that you brought up there in terms of some of the changes that someone will go through just through not necessarily looking at numbers, but just actually changing the simple things. You must have gone through this hundreds of times. Likewise, I have as well. Someone's asking you about diet advice or nutrition or weight loss, and they already know where they need to make changes. Like it's the obvious stuff. And it's like, hey, if you change that and do it consistently, like cut out the few drinks that you have here, or cut down on maybe what you're having for breakfast here, and change this. And it's 2 or 3 easy things that someone's gonna be able to do. Now, I do use my Fitness Pal, and one of the main processes on using my Fitness Pal is for clients to get a little bit more understanding. I agree. Like if you type in something, you will get, like anybody used my Fitness Pal before, you could type in egg and it will come up with 50 options for eggs. And there'll be one that tells you it's got 9 grams of this, and it will tell you that one that has got 7 grams of this. So there is definitely some misrepresentation within my Fitness Pal. But then it's also taken people from a point where they didn't actually know that eggs have some fat in them along with protein. And it's just that kind of like that realization that I use that for.
Yeah, and I think education is everything. So when I take clients, there's a program that runs in the background for 12 weeks. And it's like every week there's a post on nutrition and the science behind nutrition, but it's in like bite-sized chunks. And then I do behavioral change, and behavioral change is everything. So that's like a Wednesday post. And then I do disease on a Friday. And then in between there's recipes and stuff. But what I was going to say about behavioral change, you're saying, oh yeah, everybody knows what they should be doing. I wouldn't have a job if it was as easy as here's a piece of paper or a booklet, go away and do it. And in fact, we wouldn't have people dying of all of the non-communicable diseases that we have now. Coronary heart disease would be like at minimal rates, and diabetes would be almost non-existent unless you're type 1. And all these diseases now, high blood pressure, like for real, when you look at the NICE guidelines for blood pressure and how many points you can bring it down just by eating more vegetables, obviously reducing smoking, but changing your diet, increasing your exercise a little bit. It's stupid things like if you reduce your body weight by 2 kilograms, you reduce your risk of developing diabetes by 15%. So if you're pre-diabetic, which basically everybody is, and you reduce your body weight by 2 kilograms, you're reducing the risk of developing some horrible complications through diabetes by 15%. Are you kidding me? I'd be like, sign me up. I'll just lose like 8-9 kilograms and reduce my risk altogether.
That's transforming people's lives, but it doesn't give people that it's not that like before or after, is it? It's like 2 kg. What's 2 kg? Like I could do that tomorrow. When in reality, if they could, they would.
Yeah. And that's where behavioral change comes in. So it's like the number one thing is, why is this important to you? What matters to you in your life? Why do you want to lose weight? Like I've had people say, because my husband said, well, that's on him. That's his value, not yours. You know, why do you want to do this in the first place? Like no one's holding a gun to your head. What you usually find with over 40s is, because younger people have no association about future. They don't know what's coming. They're not bothered. So you have to associate with younger people now. Like maybe you'll have more clarity. You'll do better in your exams. Maybe you'll look better, because for younger people, it's like about looking. But when people get in their 40s and 50s, they really start thinking, this is the second half of my life. What's the quality of that life going to be? And yeah, in your 20s, as we're talking about sleep and stress, you manage things a lot differently. Except there's a lot of young people now that are exposed to a lot more stuff through social media and the internet and everything. And there's a lot more expectation, and they're a lot more instant, like they need everything now. So their stress levels are different from people in their 40s and 50s. But in 40s and 50s, it's almost easier to work with people, because they understand the risk of further disease, and they understand that weight is a big contributor of all of these other diseases that we have. But hey, so is sleep and so is stress. Going back to the first point, if you're not sleeping well, you're taking years off your life. If you're highly stressed and you don't understand through exercise or activity or breathing practices or yoga, Pilates, walking in nature, all that type of thing, if you don't spend time doing those things and your stress levels are too high, you're causing excess inflammation in your body. You're causing higher risk of disease. It's in all of the NHS documentation now for diabetes, for example. Stress and sleep are covered as big areas.
I've had 2 people in the last week come and start training with me who are, a little bit older, and both of them have said they've wanted to get it back into exercise now because of the elderly relatives that they have, and they see perhaps how frail they are when they've fallen over, the lack of bone density, bone strength, that type of stuff. And that's their why for getting back into training. And I'm like, that's amazing. Like, yeah. Do you know what? And do you know what else is going to come with you getting back into training? All of the other stuff that you want to happen. But the fact that you've come in for something as meaningful as that probably means that you're going to be successful.
Yeah, the 2 number 1 values, when you really get to the bottom of it with people, are usually health, which is triggered by their own scare or somebody else in the family, like that they can physically, see that they're around all the time, or family. So wasn't that one of the kind of like foundation philosophies for CrossFit? It's functional fitness. It's not necessarily down to now and how you perform, which is another thing about not beasting it, because if you're getting injured or you're doing something damaging to your skeletal system or muscle or whatever, then that's not going to hold you in good stead when you're trying to lift a box up onto a cupboard when you're 80. How do you want to be and feel when you're in your 80s and 90s or whatever? Do you want to be having people dress you and bath you? That's quite powerful to get people to think about that, because what do you want to be in the next 10 or 20 years? Because it depends, it matters now. But with younger people, they don't get that. They can't see that.
My little bash of CrossFit here. And I love CrossFit, and, it's always been a part of my kind of repertoire. I'm not actively involved in any CrossFit facilities now, so I can do this. CrossFit is still so young, right? What, 16, 17 years, probably maybe a little bit less it's been going.
Mm-hmm.
The top athletes who were, 2010, 2011, they're still pretty young, relatively young guys. Who's to say that when they reach 60, they're not going to have repercussions of all the weight that they lifted when they were younger? And then I don't just necessarily mean that, but there's people now, and I don't want to make out as if I wasn't one of these people. There's people now training like professional athletes 5-6 days a week, doing double training sessions, and they're not professional athletes. They're people that are going to work. They're not getting paid anything for doing these competitions. Now, professional athletes in football, in rugby or whatever, American football, there's a good chance that these guys go through the first 20 years of their career, then they retire, and then they have huge repercussions, injuries, knees, hips, surgeries that they go through. But they've done it because they've been part of a sport. Perhaps they were getting paid in that sport. They've done very well financially from it. I can't help but feel there's a lot of people now who have the negligence of going through and mistreating their bodies. And like I said before, I feel like I was probably one of them. I've kind of looking at it from a bird's eye view now. They're going to get later years in their life and go, do you know what? I wish I didn't overdo it.
I think that's probably the same with anybody who is doing anything compulsively, though, or anyone that's doing whatever sport or activity and just overtraining. There must be like hundreds of things. I think like American footballers only get a 2 to 3 year career, don't they?
Yeah.
So it's ridiculous anyway. There will be, I suppose, the proof will be in the pudding, injuries and stuff for those people competing at like high level in whatever. But the majority of people just aren't doing that. I personally think you see that a lot more in Dubai, because I think Dubai attracts a certain personality type. So people that, move away, have a lot more confidence, very driven, living, you've got to be out there and you've got to be working. And to be honest, if you're out there now, you've got to be earning a decent salary to even be there.
I think let me just bring that back around, just to not bash CrossFit so much. There's obviously an element of CrossFit which is for life as well, like longevity and things like that. And a decent CrossFit training program where you're back squatting once a week and you're doing some deadlifts and a very structured routine builds into life as well, because not doing that stuff is going to have a negative effect as well. And CrossFit, when you do the certifications, they talk heavily about, hey, being able to get up off the toilet when you're in your 70s because you've trained your legs and you can hinge from your hips and that type of stuff.
Yeah. It's like we're almost talking about two things though, aren't we? We're talking about those people that are working and looking at improving the health of people, and then we're talking about people at a competitive level. And because of the nature of maybe a CrossFit coach, how competitive they are themselves, they might not differentiate between the rest of the group or the rest of the population they're working with. I think it probably happens in lots of things. I mean, functional training is functional training anyway. It doesn't belong to CrossFit wherever you do it or whatever you're doing. But if we go back to that like least mode thing, not beast mode, and you're working, and it's all about developing that relationship. Like I swapped boxes when I came back here. I've got a much closer box I could go to, but they're all Marines, ex-Marines, and they're like, it's a lads club, and they're all training like, stupid heavy and hard. And I just felt like it was getting too competitive. And I travel a little bit further now, and I go to a box it's owned by an American woman, and she's a lot more health focused, and it's very relaxed. There's people, all shapes and sizes, all backgrounds, all different goals, everything. And it's just a lot more relaxed. But you mentioned as well about, maybe people turn up to go there for the community aspect, and they just like the vibe, and they get to see people, and maybe they've only seen work people all day or whatever it might be. They might live on their own. So, it has a lot more benefit, I suppose, than negatives. But it's about understanding you. I think the main thing is that you've got to be accountable for you, haven't you? it's not down to your nutritionist if you're not succeeding, or your coach, or any other professional. It's, you know, what am I responsible for? And I think it's crazy, but again, I'd be out of a job, that people don't do more research. So you go to the doctor and the doctor says, you've got high blood pressure, here you go. They don't say, have you considered doing a bit more exercise, changing your lifestyle, da 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 da. They just say, you know, it's reactive, tablets. You know, diabetes used to be tablets. Now people have to go on a 9-month program in the UK. Well, it's a postcode lottery, that, but in general, you know, whatever it might be, it's just like people accept that and they don't look into it. Like if the doctor says to me, you have to take something, I'm like, why? What's the alternative? What's the side effect? Talk me through it. I want to know more. And sometimes they can't, because it's just like, well, this is what we do. But the responsibility is on you as an individual. You should be researching. You know, if your nutritionist tells you to eat in a certain way, you should be researching that. Why? Tell me why. Justify it. And the same with your own training. Like if you're going, and even if your coach, let's say like you are saying, like, you know, take it easy if you want to. Scale it back. Just move. Just have fun. And you're like, no, I'm going for it. Well, then the responsibility is on you. And I think with health, whether it's a fear thing, people go, I don't want to have that responsibility. I'm going to pay this money to this trainer or this nutritionist, or, you know, whoever. I'm going to go to a private clinic, whatever it might be, because it's almost putting the responsibility back on someone else. So if you find that your job is too stressful and it's causing you health concerns, or you're not sleeping well, or you're not eating well, what are you going to do about it? What can you do about it? If you want accountability, that's something different. If you want to learn and you're paying that professional, that's different. But sometimes you find that people just go, well, it's like, I want the magic pill. I'm just going to pay this money and that's going to solve my problem. But it's not. It's down to you.
I think that's a really, really great time to wrap up the podcast, because I think everything that you've just said there, coming back down to taking responsibility, is something that I talk about a lot, and you just summed it up perfectly. And, you know, I think too many things exist where, yes, you know, I'm a big advocate for, you know, challenges and, you know, harnessing motivation when the new year comes, in 8 weeks, in 12 weeks, those types of things. But you need to realize that there needs to be something at the end of that as well. If you are, I've got no problem with someone doing an 8-week or a 12-week challenge, but just make sure you've got yourself covered when you come out the end of it. Don't get to the end of the 12 weeks of following a rigid nutrition plan and training program, and then realize that when you haven't got the coach to talk to after 12 weeks, you still don't know what you're doing. Like you said, do your research, get your money's worth from it.
Yeah, ask questions. Like, I really encourage questions. And you know what? Sometimes I can't answer everything. And I'm really honest. And I say, look, I don't actually, hold on. It's either slipped my mind, which happens a lot, or I need to have a look at this and I want to come back to you. And that's okay. You know, you're not the expert in everything. So you sometimes need to go and find stuff out, especially if it's something that might be like genetic or medical. And it could be that I have to refer that back to a like doctor or a specialist and ask the question. But yeah, I mean, the final thing I want to say about sleep is, if people aren't sleeping properly, like, why? You can get down to like loads of different reasons. If you just say brainstorm and write on a piece of paper for me every single tiny aspect that you think relates to your sleep. Birds tweeting, it's not dark enough, partner snores, I had a drink, whatever it might be, like, just cover absolutely everything that you think for anyone on the planet could be an issue, and then start circling them. That's me. What can I do about that? I've got this thing, there's 10 solutions to every problem. If you thought about it, like birds tweeting, seriously, shoot the birds, chop the tree down, like, I don't know, move house. What you could find 10, and some of them are stupid, but they are solutions. And then you can go, do you know what? Just moving bedroom, that might be the answer. But it's not like, oh, I don't sleep well, so I have to live with it. Of course you don't.
Yeah, that's quite an extreme example, but I completely agree with it. Like that bird could be ruining your life.
Yeah. And like, don't just put up with it. This is what people do. Oh, that's just me. You know, I'm really stressed, or that's just me. I really eat badly, or that's just me. I don't sleep. Well, you're defining who you are by keep saying those sentences. Just change the script. Just one tiny thing.
Gilly, let's wrap it up there. This has been an amazing podcast. And I feel like I could put a different title on this. I could have like 5 subtitles to it. It's been great. Gilly, where can people find you? Because I know that people are going to want to hear more from you.
Yeah, I have a website, so it's a bit of a mouthful, but it's betternutritionbygilly.com, and Gilly is with a G. I'm on Facebook with the same, and Instagram with the same name, Better Nutrition by Gilly. I think on Facebook people can actually WhatsApp me direct. And then I also have something called the Better Menopause Challenge. It's not running at the moment. It's all free usually. We've just finished one. But if you want to know more, there's some videos and stuff on there. Or just email me. So it's Gilly with a G at betternutritionbygilly.com.
What I'll do is I'll link the website and your profile, your Facebook profile, and then people can reach out to you from there.
Yeah, cool. Awesome.
Gilly, thanks again for coming on.
That's all right. Really enjoyed it.